Damn, am I gonna do a YouTube tier list video? Well, think about it for a moment. What do you have to gain? What do you have to lose? Let's weigh the differences here. Well, what I have to gain is a bunch of YouTube views. They do pretty well as far as the analytics are concerned. And the negatives? I don't know. It just feels cheap and like I'm whoring myself out. And it's just, what about my sense of self-respect? What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy, Tierlist Tim, and today we're taking a look at a meta report for the BT7 Next Adventure box set that has been out for about a month and a half, 2 months here in Japan. So the competitive landscape has kind of settled. Decks that are good have kind of risen to the top. Decks that are not performing so well have kind of, fell to the wayside. So I think now is a good point for us to take a look at the meta right before the new starter decks with dual color Tamers and Joggers Evolution come out. Actually tomorrow. If you're interested in what I just said or any of that information, I did a video on it recently about what Joggers Evolution was, as well as the mechanics for dual color cards. If you want to take a look on the channel for that one as well. But yeah, so we've got 14 decks we're going to take a look at that more or less shape the entirety of the competitive landscape for BT7. And we're going to put those in a ranking of best performing to worst performing through the tournaments that have happened here in good old Japan. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. This is not my opinion at all. I'm going to give a little bit of background on each of the decks and kind of what their strong points and weak points are, things like that. But this is all just based off of pure numbers. I'm not trying to put my opinion on any of this. It's purely what's won tournament and what hasn't. So it's not me. All right, just at the end of the day, don't yell at me. You know what? Or do. Comments help the YouTube algorithm, so whatever. Anyway, let's take a look at the decks. So first up, we're going to take a look at Blue Hybrid. So this is the hybrid package without the Gabu Bond at all. And this deck has done awesome. It does so well a job at just disrupting your opponent's Digimon, removing sources, sending cards back to the hand, as well as the cards like Ice Wall, which force your opponent to lose memory on Digimon swings. This card is able to slow opponents down while also being very quick in itself, and that's what's made it basically one of the best decks in the entire meta. Moving right along, I've got Discard Purple, which unfortunately has not performed as well as I'd hoped it would. Cards like Eismon and Eismon Scatter Mode came out in BT7, but unfortunately those cards can't swing the turn that they are played because of their effects, and unfortunately that means that this deck becomes a little bit slower than other decks in the meta. Additionally, in BT7, trying to build from a level 2 or 3 to a level 6 is honestly a little slow. And trying to build to a Titamon or, get the Eismon out just isn't fast enough. Moving right along, we've got Security Control, which was incredibly powerful before BT7 launched. In BT6, after the Classic Collection, this deck was really, really strong. Luckily, Put Trash Where It Goes emoji right down here in C tier. This deck has not performed very well. With the advent of hybrids and tamers being such a big part of the meta, this card can no longer wipe boards clean because most of the time there are no boards and there's very few actual tamer removal cards. Speaking of BT6, we've got Jesmon here. Now, Jesmon was an awesome deck in BT6, very powerful, tier 1 deck for a very long time, and I'm happy to say that it continues to be a very strong deck. With the tamers and hybrids kind of running rampant in the meta right now, Jesmon has a little bit of trouble. However, the new Sister Mont Blanc Awakened that they got in BT7 is absolutely bonkers. I didn't really think much of it until I actually playtested it with a buddy of mine, but being able to just recover almost at will is incredibly powerful for this deck. So they can stay alive a lot longer than they could before, and that gives them time to search out and actually build their Jesmon. So this is one of the few decks that builds traditionally from a level 3 or level 2 to a level 6, and is still very highly rated in the meta. Next up, Antibody X. So Antibody X, really cool archetype, really interesting effects. Unfortunately, falls a little short in this meta. The good thing that I can say about this deck is that in BT8 they're getting a little bit more support, and I hope to see the deck perform a lot better there, or at least in the future. Again, the Antibody X ability of being able to build a huge stack and get a ton of effects off the stack is really fun, and I hope to see that in BT8. So, returning to some of the hybrid decks that have been introduced in BT7, Kaiser Greymon, the red hybrid deck, has been performing awesomely. The thing that I need to stress here, is that Kaiser Greymon, this deck kind of needs the Ancient Greymon to function well and be able to compete with other, tier 1 really strong decks. The reason I say that is because otherwise, with just Kaiser Greymon, he's a bit slow. He doesn't restand whenever you Digivolve into him, and so having Blitz is great, but in a lot of cases, like, it's kind of just useless. So yeah, keep that in mind. This deck needs Ancient Greymon to perform. So if you don't have those, then this deck is probably going to fall a couple of tiers. So speaking of falling a couple of tiers, next up I've got Beelstarmon. This deck was actually doing pretty well, again, after the Classic Collection was released. However, recently, with the advent of Tamers and Hybrids and being able to just have a row of Tamers and then one by one Digivolve them to make security swings, this deck really falls flat. So for that reason, see she goes. On the flip side, there are decks that have been performing really, really well that were around before, and that includes Lilithmon Loop. So this deck has risen to prominence within just the past week. I think it's gotten so far around 45 or 50 wins in recent tournaments. If there's a deck that I think would improve, its ranking or standing would improve on this list, this would be my #1 contender, Lilithmon Loop. The advent of the Cerberus Mons as fodder to get immediate swings was a great addition to this deck, and being able to use Eismon and Eismon Scatter Mode are probably the best utility or use of those cards in any purple deck, because this card needs to cycle, and those cards enable cycle and build boards at the same time. If you're more interested in what this deck does or how it's built, take a look. I've got another video about this I did a couple days ago, and you can check that out on the channel as well. So I've talked a lot about Classic Collection, but I haven't really talked about the main deck or the most popular deck from the Classic Collection, and that is the Mugendramon. These days, this deck is kind of in flux. Although, it's still not performing well. It moves between like a red, blue, black, some other colors. People are trying out a lot of stuff with this deck. This deck also got access to Chaos Doromon, which is a great way to remove Digimon, as well as build up the sources and potentially get to Omnimon Antibody X, which, when that drops, the game is pretty much over. He can basically negate attacks forever with all of the sources that this Mugendramon will provide you. Talking about great showings, man, Hybrid Yellow right now is the king of the meta. Hybrid Yellow, the crazy part is it's doing super well, and it's not even figured out yet. Early on, people were using, Shine Greymon because, of course, Shine Greymon and Tamers go together hand in hand. And with the hybrid package as well, and then the Shoot Sylphmon, which allows you to recover, this is a really strong control-oriented deck. Recently, though, people have been experimenting with purple. So they've been running a couple of purple cards in the deck, as well as the purple option. The name is, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, I'm sorry, but Schwarz-Lesart. It's the option that basically lets you remove a level 5 or lower from your opponent's side of the board for every Tamer or Hybrid you have. And in yellow, that's a lot of Tamers. So yeah, people have also been messing around with the level 6s in this deck. Again, I said that they started out with Shine Greymon, but they've moved on to things like Kazuchimon, Dynasmon, TK Seraphmon that recently released alongside BT7, which people thought kind of wasn't very great. People start to run that as well. So yeah, this deck is not even figured out, and it's very clearly the best deck in the meta. So we haven't really talked much about green. So you take a look at all these decks here that I've mentioned before. None of them have included green. However, green hybrid is doing decently well, I guess you could say. Among the decks within, I guess, the B rank here, green has probably done the best out of all of them. Let me put it like that. Things like Nidhogg and Troyamon are pretty scary. They've also added in Argomon, the level 6 Argomon, which allows you to rest all of your opponent's Tamers when he's Digivolved into. And then additionally, all of your opponent's Tamers cannot unrest. So, in a lot of cases, he can force opponents to just play Digimon who can't swing immediately. Alright, we're down to the last 3 decks. The next one I want to talk about is Hybrid Purple. So before I talked about Discard Purple, which I said was a little slow, trying to build up to the level 6 from a level 3 in this meta, unfortunately, Hybrid Purple doesn't perform as well either. And I think that's mostly because the effects that Purple got access to in this set just weren't super powerful. This deck, unfortunately, doesn't have the firepower that, the blue, the yellow, the red might have. For that reason, it unfortunately falls by the wayside. Next up, Gabubon Blue. This deck was so strong in BT6, and it's still pretty dang strong in BT7. What a lot of people have done is they've basically just taken the hybrid package and cut out the Magna Garurumon and just added in the Gabubon package, and that's it. That's the deck. So you get access to all the good hybrid tamer effects. You get access to all the good Gabu Bond, being able to swing 3 times in a turn, clear your opponent's board at the same time effects. And yeah, what's not to like about this deck? I tried this out in a couple of play matches with a buddy of mine. It performed excellently. So if you're looking for a deck that is strong in BT6, that it will continue to be strong in BT7, this is definitely a top contender alongside Jessamon. Finally, the last deck we've got, Dark Knightsmon. So Dark Knightsmon was a really cool, interesting archetype where you kind of build up your Dark Knight and your Deadly Axe, and you get a Digimon that's got 9,000 and can swing for 2 security at the same time. Problem is, it's kind of slow. Yep, speed is king in this meta. And what people try to do to speed it up is pair it up with something else that's pretty quick, and that includes something like Commandramon. So right now, I think the most seen build, or the most tried out build, is the Dark Knights plus Commandramon being able to go into Dark Doramon and then digivolve him into Omegamon Zwart and then swing and pull out 2 Dark Knights. They get their effects, and hopefully if you live the next turn, you just end the game with 4 security swings at 9,000. Unfortunately, again, it's speed is king, and so it hasn't really performed that well. In fact, it's performed pretty badly. Hopefully this deck gets some more aggro support for black in upcoming sets, but right now it's just not cutting it. And so that's it. This is the list of how the decks have been performing in tournaments in Japan. There's a lot of decks that I wasn't able to show just because, again, you could slap together a miserable pile of cards and call it a deck, but at the end of the day, they're just not getting enough wins to be represented here. And so if I didn't talk about a deck that you want to see, you can either A, ask in the comments, but usually the answer is going to be didn't get enough wins. I think this list went, I think from the top, I think it was like 84 wins as of current with the hybrid yellow. At the very bottom, we had around 10 wins with Beelstar Mall. So if I got less than 10 wins, I just didn't include it for my sanity and the time of this video. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Catch you next time, and bye-bye.